Hey guys, and in this video, let's talk about the best settings for your GoPro in low light. So even though GoPro is not a typical camera to be used in low light because of the small sensor, still there are a lot of people who take their camera on a travel, during the evening, recording a sunset, etc. So in this video, I'm going to do a quick overview of the Protune settings in your GoPro and explain you which one to use and why. ISO is responsible for how sensitive your camera is towards light. And on a GoPro camera, you can set this value from 100, which is a low sensitivity, up to 6400, which is quite high. Generally, you want to set your ISO to the lowest value possible, because it's gonna result in a clean video with no grain and artifacts. If you increase the ISO, the scene gonna get brighter, but it comes with a cost. Because the camera gonna be more sensitive to light, there's gonna be more grain and noise in the picture. So personally, I think that the safe zone when it comes to ISO is between 100 and 400 ISO. Occasionally, if I record my low light videos, I go up to 800 ISO. But if you go above that and you set your camera to 1600 or 3200, there will be simply so much grain and artifacts in it that the footage will be unusable. Now, let's talk about the frames per second. So what is it? So let's treat a frame as a simple photo. So for example, your camera, in this case GoPro, can shoot for example 24 frames per second. What it means is that within one single second, it can record 24 photos. So for example, if you select 60 frames per second or 120 frames per second, what it means that within one single second, your camera gonna take 60 photos or 120 photos. So what's gonna happen if you select higher frames per second? Every photo needs some light to be properly exposed, so when you record your video with 24 frames per second, within one single second, your camera gonna take 24 photos. So there is quite a bit of light to enter every single frame. However, if you increase that value and there's gonna be 60 frames per second or maybe 120, then within such a short period of time, you want your camera to take a lot of photos. So the whole scene overall gonna get darker because there will be simply not enough light for every single frame. So if you want to let more light into your camera, then you need to lower down your frames per second. So what about the resolution? Well, it's a very simple one. If you want to have better quality in your video and you are not worried about the space, then you can select for example 4K or 5K. On the other hand, if you don't have much space, then you can lower down your resolution to 2.7K or 1080p. The EV compensation setting gives you the ability to manually set your exposure, so you can make it darker or brighter. This way, you can preserve the highlights, the brighter parts of the image by underexposing your scene. And of course, you can brighten it up, but whenever I record my videos in low light, I always set my camera to 0.0 EV compensation. And now, let's talk about the auto exposure. So whenever you record your video, your camera is constantly adjusting to the brightness level. So for example, if you focus your camera on the darker parts and then quickly focus on the sky, you will see the auto exposure quite clearly. And this is exactly the reason why I recommend you to play with locked exposure, because there will be simply no sudden change in brightness level.
Okay, go! Go!
But on the other hand, if you're not going to move around with your camera too much and you're just gonna focus on one direction, then auto exposure is just fine. So what about the color profile? Should you record your videos with GoPro Color or flat? So if you don't want to edit your videos, then GoPro Color gonna give you that colorful, full of contrast look during the day. However, it doesn't work in low light, because certain parts of your video can be simply so dark that there will be simply no information in it whatsoever. And that's exactly the reason why I always prefer to record my videos in flat profile, because there is simply more information in highlights and shadows. It's simply easier to edit and you simply have more control in post-production, because once you bake that information in with GoPro Color, it's simply very hard to recover in post-production. White balance is a setting where you simply want to capture natural looking colors. So for example, if there is something white, you want it to stay that way, so it's not too blue or too yellow. So for example, if there's gonna be a sunny day and then tomorrow there's gonna be a cloudy day, then the white balance is gonna be different. Now, if you take a closer look at the Kelvin scale, there are in fact two spectrums. So you can set your camera towards warmer tones or towards colder ones. However, you need to find some balance in it, because if you set it too high or too low, it's gonna be either too blue or too yellow. So once again, play with it and find the right balance. You can also set your camera to auto white balance, and on a GoPro camera it really does a good job. However, if you're going to move around with your camera and focusing on different light sources, then in the middle of your recording the white balance can simply switch, and this is really hard to fix in post-production. So if you want to have the best results, it's simply easier to set it to manual, like 5000K or 6000K, depending on what you need, because it's simply gonna be easier for you in post-production. Alright, so what about the stabilization? Honestly, if it's gonna be way too dark, the Hypersmooth Stabilisation is not gonna work. In this case, you're gonna need a gimbal. Hypersmooth, in other words, is like electronic image stabilization. And this thing simply needs a lot of light to work perfectly. You simply need that light to make every single frame in your video crystal clear, so the software can simply align it together so you have stable video. Now, if you don't have enough light, there's gonna be some jitters, there's gonna be some blur in your shot, and it's not gonna look good. So if you're going to record a lot of videos in low light and you want to have the best results possible, then I strongly recommend you to go for a gimbal. If not, you can always stick to a traditional tripod. But Hypersmooth in low light, it's not gonna work really well. Alright guys, so what do you think about these low light settings for your GoPro? Honestly, I record quite a lot of videos during the golden hour, such as sunrise, sunset. It simply looks magical. So once again, GoPro is not a typical camera to be used in low light, but given the right conditions, you can use it. Just make sure that there is enough light so your video is stable and simply bright enough. Alright, I really tried to make this video as simple as possible, because if you find value in my videos, then you learn something from it. And if you did, then give me a thumb up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't before, smash the notification button so you don't miss my future content, guys, and see you in the next one.